Toronto police are investigating a tragic situation tonight following the death of a baby reported missing in Midtown. We're going to have the latest coming up.
And the families of Paul Bernardo's victims told they cannot attend the convicted killer's upcoming parole hearing. More on the ruling from the parole board and reaction so far.
And a new poll is providing some insight on how often Canadian drivers admit to speeding and the overall impact when it comes to safety on our roadways.
This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Saab.
And I'm Lena Latafat. Thank you for joining us here on Live at 5. Police are investigating the death of an infant after the child was reported missing at a building in the Allen and Eglinton area today.
The CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan is live and continues our coverage from the building on Roselawn Avenue. Steve.
Yeah, Bakari and Lena, 855 Roselawn is the location. It's near Roselawn and Marley. Now, we do know, according to police, that the initial call came in at 11:24 this morning. A family member reported a 4-month-old child missing. The police attended, did a quick search, and they were able to find the 4-month-old. Now, that baby had obvious signs of trauma, and the baby was rushed to a hospital via an emergency run. And sadly, the baby succumbed to their injuries just a short time after arriving at hospital. So the police have deemed this death to be suspicious, and that's because of a couple of things. Children just don't die on their own, of course, if there is an accident or disease, but in this case, you've got a child that's gone missing, obvious trauma, and now there's a death. So it'll be investigated as a suspicious death by the local detectives here at 13th Division. The homicide squad will monitor this case closely. There'll be an autopsy most likely conducted tomorrow to determine a cause of death. And if that cause of death is determined to be as a result of foul play, well, then the homicide squad will step in and take over this investigation as a homicide investigation. But right now, it's a suspicious death investigation being conducted by the detectives at 13th Division. Heavy police presence here throughout the day, both outside and inside the building itself. The forensics team was on scene, and they continue to be on scene as the investigation continues. Now, I did speak with a resident in that building a short time after I arrived, and here is some of what he told me. Let's have a listen.
I couldn't see if she was handcuffed or not because the blanket was over her. Obviously, it was cold, but she didn't seem in any distress. She was awake, alert. She wasn't saying anything.
Was she put in the police car?
No, they escorted her. They put her in the ambulance on the stretcher, and they had a police escort follow her.
Now, just before this hit, I did get some information, sadly, and that is that the police are conducting their investigation on the 8th floor. They've got the garbage chute on the 8th floor taped off. They are focusing their forensics investigation on that 8th floor garbage chute and the garbage beneath that 8th floor on the ground here. They have got that as part of their crime scene as well. So a tragic case, and we'll have to wait for the cause of death before the police will make a determination as to how this infant died. So back to you guys.
Yeah, so very tragic. Steve Ryan working on this developing story for us tonight. Steve, thanks so much for this. Well, a man has pleaded guilty to murder in a random stabbing that left a teenage boy dead at Keel Station. A
16-year-old Gabriel Magalhaes was sitting on a bench in the station March of 2023. That's when he was fatally stabbed by Jordan O'Brien Tobin, and what police are describing as an unprovoked attack. So O'Brien Tobin, who's now 24, was originally charged with first-degree murder, but pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder in court today.
Well, several residents of a building near Keel and Finch, they had to be rescued by firefighters this afternoon. And it happened by Keel Street and St. Regis Crescent in the area around 2 o'clock.
And fire crews, they were called to the low-rise apartment. Again, this was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon when it happened. When they got there, they found heavy smoke coming from the second and third floors. There were no injuries reported.
All you could see was a whole bunch of flames shooting out of the second floor, but going up to the third floor as well. And then they had to bring in a bunch of ladders to get people out from the third floor. So they were smashing people's windows just to get them out. A few people, they didn't even want to leave, so they just kind of stayed inside their apartment. So they were just telling people, we'd prefer if you got out, but a lot of them just didn't want to come down the ladder. I can't blame them because I wouldn't have wanted to either.
Okay, so as of yet, the cause and circumstances around that fire, not released just yet.
Yeah, and the investigation, of course, continues to another investigation, an OPP investigation now of an armed robbery that happened on Highway 410. That happened last night.
Police say after 8 o'clock last night, the victim's vehicle was hit from behind by a red car. Both cars stopped between Sandalwood Parkway and Mayfield Road. So it's alleged that 3 or 4 suspects, one armed with a gun, the other with a knife, they got out and then robbed the victim.
It would be an extremely challenging situation, to be confronted with that sort of surprise in such what would be considered sort of a normal occurrence. Where he's thought that he was just involved in a minor collision.
Investigators are looking for information from anyone who might have been in the area at the time.
Right now it's 5:06, 9 degrees. Let's get a check on the 5 o'clock commute with traffic specialist Adjo Nsiah-Yeboah. Adj.
Yeah, Lena Bakari, it's been quite the afternoon. A lot of delays, which are to be expected, but problems which have been with us for over 2.5 hours. This is on the 401 eastbound. If you're trying to get into Durham, you still can, but if you're trying to exit the ramp to Salem, you only have that single right lane getting by. The left lane has been blocked for the better part of 2.5 hours because of this collision cleanup. Now, if your travels do take you towards the Don Valley Parkway, still busy. No issues, though, from Bayview Bloor-up to the 401, and quickly checking in on your drive as you travel into Vaughan on the northbound lanes of the 400. Delays start approaching Highway 7. They continue all the way up towards Teston, where I'm seeing a little bit of light drizzle. Outside of camera view, we have a collision blocking lanes on North Toronto, impacting Eglinton just east of Mount Pleasant.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
Okay, right now, the National Parole Board is facing questions. This is after telling the families of Paul Bernardo's victims that they cannot attend his upcoming parole hearing.
Yeah, and for more on this, let's go live to CP24's Lindsay Biscaya. You've had the chance to speak with the lawyer representing the families, Lindsay.
Yeah, exactly, Lena Bakari, and I'm waiting this hour for an update from that lawyer, Tim Danson, who, as you say, representing the families of the 2 teenagers who were kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and killed by Paul Bernardo back in the 1990s. Tim Danson joined us last hour because he has sent an open letter to the parole board asking that the families of the victims be allowed to attend the hearing next week for Paul Bernardo. Of course, the parole board has said that it would not allow those families to attend, citing safety and security concerns for all attendees. And Tim Danson has said that that doesn't really make sense to him. He wants the families there so they can deliver their statements in person at the time of the hearing. Now, when we spoke with Danson last hour, he said that he actually had just received a voicemail, and he believes it's from the parole board. That was right before our interview. So we're waiting for an update on him in terms of what the parole board is going to say, whether it's going to change its mind. We know Tim Danson also asked for the hearing to be postponed. So waiting to see if maybe that is part of the case. But we did have a chance to speak with him about how important it is for the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French to be able to be there in person next week. And here's what he had to say.
In this vulnerable emotional state, they're now being told that they can't even physically appear at the parole hearing as they did at his original parole hearing. It's hard to imagine that there were no security concerns when we appeared in a maximum federal penitentiary like Millhaven, and then all of a sudden in a medium security penitentiary, there's magically security problems. It makes no sense. It's not credible, and it's no way to treat these victims. They've suffered enough.
So that was obviously quite some controversial news earlier this year when Paul Bernardo was moved to a medium security prison just outside of Montreal. He is, of course, designated as a dangerous offender. That being said, Tim Danson says the family should be able to be there for that hearing. So again, we're waiting now for an update to see if maybe anything has changed. But at this hour, that is still pending. Back to you.
Okay, CP24's Lindsay Biscaya after speaking with the attorney for the families. Well, Brampton City Council has passed a bylaw that would ban protests near places of worship. It
comes after a violent demonstration outside the Hindu Sabha Mandir earlier this month. That demonstration, initiated by Sikh separatists who seek an independent nation, spurred a counter-protest at the same temple where police allege some in the crowd were carrying weapons and throwing objects. Several people were arrested. Mayor Patrick Brown says the bylaw passed today protects the right to pray.
There was multiple protests, tit-for-tat protests, and I'm glad that anyone who commits an act of violence is charged and hopefully prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And I think now that the police have laid out who has been charged, temperatures have been lowered, and hopefully that sends a message that protest, political debate is permissible, but it can never cross the line into violence. We don't condone that in Canada. We never will. And so I'm optimistic that we have better days ahead.
The incidents that happen in my ward, and I've heard from community members on either side or residents from across in the city saying that violence of this sort is not acceptable, especially not at places of worship. So this bylaw, what it aims to do is it adds another extra tool, for enforcement action to be taken when protests happen in or around a place of worship, because everybody has the right to feel safe, to go with their families. That's a place of solace and peace where you go to be with one another. But it's sometimes it could be intimidating if you have a protest outside of whatever nature.
However, the bylaw does not apply in cases where a place of worship is being used for a non-religious event.
You're watching Live at 5. Coming up, the proposed plan to make city vehicles safer, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists. We'll tell you more. Welcome back. City staff are recommending that side guards be added to all heavy-duty vehicles in Toronto's fleet as a way to protect pedestrians and cyclists.
Okay, for more on the story, let's go live to CP24. Sija Liu. Sija, explain the details, the timeline, and the price tag.
Well, let's get started with explaining what side guards are. Essentially, they are railings that can be placed on the side of large trucks around the axle that would prevent a pedestrian or cyclist from going underneath the wheel if there was a collision. Now, this is a plan being proposed by Mayor Olivia Chow to install these side guards on all city-owned heavy trucks. Essentially, pedestrians could just bounce off of these side guards if they got hit by a truck instead of getting trapped underneath the wheels. She says this is a move that could significantly reduce tragic collisions and save lives. According to city staff, side guards can reduce cyclist fatalities by approximately 62% and pedestrian fatalities by 20%. So a report is set to go before the Infrastructure and Environment Committee next week, which will recommend the city install side guards on all of its heavy-duty vehicles. And retrofitting Toronto's roughly 500 heavy-duty vehicles would cost around $5.7 million. And the reason why Mayor Olivia Chow is doing this hits close to home for her. Back in 2011, when she was an MP, a 38-year-old woman died after getting hit by a transport truck while she was riding a bike. And she made a promise to her family that she would do something about that and make sure this never happens again. So this side guard initiative is something she has been championing for years now. Take a listen to what Mayor Olivia Chow has to say on the timeline of when she would like to see these devices installed.
At bare minimum, our city trucks need to have side guards on them. So I am just extremely delighted to see 50 of these heavy-duty trucks have side guards on them. And other 219 will be, these side guards will be installed in these trucks next year. And all 500 of city trucks will have side guards by 2026 at the end of the year.
Now, side guards aren't a new concept. They exist in places around Europe. However, there are no federal or provincial regulations requiring side guards on trucks. But next week, Mayor Olivia Chow, she will be meeting with the Ontario Transport Minister in hopes of getting a provincial regulation when it comes to vehicles on top of just city trucks as well. Back to you.
Okay, CP24, Sija Liu with a new initiative by the city. Thanks a lot, Sija. With that, it is now 5:16. 9 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Mailboxes, they're still sitting empty across the country tonight as the strike at Canada Post continues to disrupt deliveries heading into the busy holiday season. We're going to get an update on that situation next. Mediated talks continue in the strike that's shut down postal service all across the country.
CP24's Andrew Brennan joins us live from the South Central Sorting Facility. This is on Eastern Avenue. Andrew, you've been there for quite a few hours today.
Yeah, and one thing that becomes a challenge is in this day and age where everything goes through PR, a lot of the workers they're not allowed to speak on camera, but they do talk and they do have a lot of things to say. So some of the things that I've heard from people is, they're about to retire. They're here for the next generation. The question is, what will Canada Post look like? So let's start with what the union has said that they're looking for. They're talking about wage increases in a demand of about a quarter of an increase from what they have right now, 24% over 4 years. And the comparison from the side of the employer, Canada Post is saying that it's offering 11.5%. So in terms of what the union wants and in terms of what they're saying they need, they're saying that just like everyone else there, they're trying to keep up with inflation and ensure that they can afford to put food on the table. Listen to this.
Toronto are falling behind. The rent we all know rent in Toronto has gone up, doubled in the last 7 years. There's a housing crisis. This crisis affects postal workers too. We've been trapped under a 2% wage increase that we agreed to extend the contract during COVID time. Yes, we had a cost of living, but our wage increase that they want to give us now is based on that 2%, not on the cost of living. We're falling behind as postal workers.
But in terms of operational revenue versus, losses, Canada Post is also falling behind as well. Parcel delivery, even in city centers, has gone from them being the majority or holding a majority market share to 20% post the pandemic. And then you also have a company which is on paper hemorrhaging money. You have a $3 billion posted loss in 2018. Just this year, the loss is already amounting to roughly $1 million of loss money per day. So this is what the employer says that it is looking for.
Thirds of our employees, regular or part-time, make about $30 an hour or more. And we put forward 11.5% over the next 4 years. Obviously, the union is asking for more, and we'll continue to have those discussions. But the reality is our business, whether it's letters or parcels, are all headed in the wrong direction. We need to put forward a more flexible delivery model that allows us to deliver on weekends, because that's the name of the game in the parcel business these days. People order things on a Friday, they want them on a weekend. We can't provide that today at an affordable rate, and that's killing us in terms of our parcel business.
So let's say right now the impasse is more like a chasm between both sides. But Lena Bakar, as we throw it back, for people at home that get benefit checks from the government, that is one thing that will still be delivered even with everything else shut down. Back to you both.
All right, good to know. Andrew, thanks so much for this. Andrew Brennan live by the picket line tonight. It's 5:21 now, 9 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
And just ahead, taking a look at how often Canadian drivers are ignoring the speed limits. That story is next. Okay, speed racer, lead foot. 1 in 5 drivers admit to regularly speeding. This is according to a recent poll.
CAA's annual survey on driving habits found half of drivers said they often speed on highways, while nearly 70% admitted to speeding in a residential area at least once in the past year. According to the Traffic Injury Research Foundation, traveling even 10 kilometers an hour over the speed limit increases the likelihood of a collision by 60%, while saving the average driver only 4 minutes on a trip. So is it really worth it? I would say not. Here to talk more about dangerous driving behaviors is CAA's Senior Director of Public Affairs, Christine Darbel. Christine, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, were you expecting people to be this honest? And do you think people are being completely truthful?
Well, the fact that 70% of people admitted to speeding in a residential area, again, that number is really high. We've seen this number increase ever since the pandemic. This started in 2020 when we saw that there were less cars on the road, people weren't driving to work anymore, and the streets were quiet, so people started speeding. And then we were hoping that that number would start coming down as people started to go back to work. the roads started to fill up again. People started to be outside and walking around. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. So now we have an increased amount of speeding and an increased amount of people on the roads. Put those two together, and it's not great.
Okay, but look, it's not just young people who are doing this, right? Because there's some interesting stats in this. Let's hear it.
Exactly. Everyone is admitting to speeding. I know sometimes the assumption is that it's the young drivers who are doing it, but it's not. We saw that almost every age group was admitting to speeding. The only age group that slightly, and we're talking about only a couple of percentage points, was 50 plus. Everyone else admitted to speeding.
What is your advice then on how to make sure that you're slowing down? For so many people, it's just something that becomes a habit over time. Is there any advice for drivers?
Well, one thing that you had mentioned actually at the beginning is that some people think, well, if by speed, I'm going to get to my destination faster. Ultimately, you're saving microscopic amounts of second, but you're increasing the chance of yourself getting in a collision by 60%. So you might save something like 30 seconds, maybe up to 4 minutes on a really long trip, but you're increasing your chance of getting in a collision by 60%. So then you kind of have to ask yourself, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
And I don't think so.
Okay, now here's something that is even more frightening. We're talking about running red lights.
Yes, we also saw, so we do this survey, CAA does this survey every year where we ask people to tell us, what do they do on the road? Speeding was obviously the number one. Another thing found was that 4 in 10 Canadians admit to running a red light. So we've got a lot of aggressive driving behavior that we're seeing here. And we're really hoping that people just take a pause and think about the other road users around them, the drivers around them. In fact, today happens to be the National Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. So keep that in mind. We don't want to have road traffic victims. There shouldn't have to be a day to remember road traffic victims. Slow down a little bit, do the speed limit, stop at those stop signs. These seem like very simple little tips, but they help everyone on the road and they make sure that everyone gets home safe at the end of the day.
Yeah, it could save lives at the end of the day. CAA Senior Director of Public Affairs, Christine Darbel, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate you breaking down these stats for us.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now it's 5:28, 9 degrees, feeling more like 6 outside. This is Live at 5.
And we are following a tragic story unfolding in Midtown as police are investigating the death of an infant reported missing earlier today. Stay with us for more on that.
And Toronto police are investigating a tragic situation tonight. This is following the death of a baby reported missing in Midtown. CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan continues our coverage this hour.
The families of Paul Bernardo's victims told they cannot attend the convicted killer's upcoming parole hearing. More on the ruling from the parole board and reaction so far.
And we're tracking the talks between Canada Post and its workers, with a special mediator now involved in an attempt to bring this nationwide strike to an end.
You're watching Live at 5. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latifat.
And I'm Bakari Savage. Police are investigating the death of an infant after the child was reported missing at a building in the Allen and Eglinton area today.
CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan joins us live from the building on Roselawn Avenue. Police, Steve, I know we're still waiting to learn so much more from police. What more can you tell us?
Well, Lena and Bakari, we know that this occurrence started at 11:24 this morning. 855 Roselawn is the scene. It's the rental apartment building behind me here. It's on the corner of Roselawn and Marley. Police say at 11:24, a family member called police to say that their 4-month-old infant had gone missing. And police arrived on scene. They did a quick search and were able to find the baby. The baby was still alive. A emergency run was done. The EMS transported the child to hospital, but sadly the baby died. Now, I am told that there were obvious signs of trauma on the baby, so investigators from 13th Division have deemed this death to be suspicious for obvious reasons. You've got trauma on a 4-month-old child. The child went missing from the home, and now the child has died. So this is going to depend on an autopsy to determine which direction this investigation goes. If the autopsy concludes that the death was as a result of foul play, well, then the homicide squad will step in and take care of the investigation. They will closely monitor this while 13th Division investigates. Now, children just don't die. Infants just don't die. Of course, unless there is an accident or if there is disease. But in this case, that certainly doesn't seem to be the case on its face, but it will depend on an autopsy that will be done at Sick Kids Hospital most likely tomorrow morning, and the pathologist will then make a determination as to what the cause of death would be, and then we'll find out more with regards to which way this investigation is going. I did speak with a local resident earlier on today, and Councillor Cole stopped by this area as well. And here's more from the two of them. Let's listen.
I didn't hear a single yell. I'm right above where they would have lived, so I didn't hear a single person yelling. I didn't hear an argument. I didn't hear banging or anything. So, but it's really sad. It's just really sad.
They escorted the baby with the ambulance to Humber River Hospital, where they tried resuscitation. The resuscitation, unfortunately, did not succeed. And so the baby was pronounced dead at Humber River, and the coroner is there, has taken over the investigation so far, and the police at 13th Division are controlling the situation right now and interviewing interested persons at the station to get some information, basically to find out what the heck happened.
I am told as part of this investigation, the Toronto Police have secured the garbage chute on the 8th floor, sadly, and the garbage location on the ground. They would be primary and secondary crime scenes along with any other scene that may require investigations here at 855 Roselawn. Send it back to the desk.
Okay, CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan. Well, Barrie police have scaled back their presence on Bayfield Street. This is after a standoff with an armed person in crisis.
Homes and stores were evacuated after a 43-year-old man barricaded himself inside an RV in a parking lot yesterday at around noon. Police say when they made contact, the man fired a shot. No one was injured, though. Officers, the tactical team, and crisis negotiators were brought in to try to resolve the situation. At around 4 o'clock this morning, the man surrendered and was arrested and taken for medical attention. Several apparent explosive devices were found in the RV. All were neutralized safely.
With that, it's now 5:35, 9 degrees. Let's get a check on the evening commute with CP24 traffic specialist Adjo Ntiyabois. Adj, the streets are slick, just like my tongue trying to say your name.
But you did it. You pulled it off. And you'll do it, too, if you're a driver or commuter headed home this afternoon. It is obviously darker than what we're used to, but if you're making your way out, you're running into problems as well. So this is on the northbound lanes of the 404, just north of Highway 7. Center lane, this is a brand new situation, has the center lane blocked with this collision. So if you're headed that way, it's already backed up from Dundas on the DVP North. All the routes are very slow. I'd suggest an alternative. There isn't really much of one. Also problems I've been watching for a long time. This is the eastbound lanes of the 401. It's a ramp that takes you to Salem. This left lane has been out for now over 2 hours following a pretty serious multi-vehicle collision. You do have that single right lane that continues to get by. And checking in on the Gardner, it's a slow go as you make your way out of and head into the downtown core. Again, you have to deal with that long-term road work. On city streets in North Toronto, crews trying to clear a collision that's impacting Eglinton. Eastbound lanes are blocked just east of Mount Pleasant. I'll send it back to you both.
Adjoa, thanks so much. Well, today is the Transgender Day of Remembrance.
Marked every November 20th. The day honors the memory of transgender people whose lives were lost to violence. It was started in 1999. That's a year after a prominent trans advocate in Boston was murdered. That case is still unsolved. A monitoring group say at least 350 transgender and gender diverse people have been murdered over the past year. The majority of them, trans women.
Well, mediated talks continue in the strike that shut down postal service across the country, and the timing could not be worse with the holidays right around the corner.
Yeah, right now, let's go live to CP24's Andrew Brennan, who joins us from the South Central Sorting Facility. That's on Eastern Avenue. Andrew.
Yeah, Bakari, Lena, this is definitely not coming at a good time for not only Canadians looking for it to have their gifts sent out to anybody around the country or even get them, but also for local businesses, small businesses particularly. We've shared those stories already on CP24. The question is how do we get out of this impasse, which seems like a deepening and widening chasm right now, even when we're hearing of small progresses being made for the little things at the bottom of the list of grievances for both the union and the employer. Let's start with what the union is saying. They're talking about whether or not Canada Post is in dire financial straits. They're pointing the finger at the employer for being where they are.
When unionized workers get ahead, all workers get ahead. We are asking for fairness for us. Regarding these losses you're alluding to, they've opened and invested $500 million in a new plant. It's called the Albert Jackson plant. They made strategic investments in new trucks. The mismanagement of the postal system is not by the workers. It's by the executives. It's the vice presidents. It's the CEOs. And they're still there. None of them have been dismissed. None of them have been asked to leave. The sales staff, they were working from home until a month ago. Suddenly they've been sent back. It is not the workers that need to pay the price.
We've been working together with our unions to try and build the postal system back. Obviously, letters have declined like they have all over the world. We've made investment, but just from a simple business standpoint, our operating expenses are higher than our revenues coming in. And that's going to lead to losses every single time. Yes, we have made some investments. We're trying to catch up so we can better compete in the parcel business. They're all geared for growth. But the reality is our operating expenses are higher than our revenues. And our labor costs went up 6.5% last year.
Now, Lena Bakar, if you want to talk about the financial quagmire that the Canada Post Crown Corporation finds itself in, this is a company that just this year is essentially averaging $1 million in posted losses for 2024. You go back just to 2018, it's $3 billion in posted losses. So this is a company that does have to transition and is essentially fighting for its future. The question is, will it include 55,000 workers unionized as they are right now, or what will change even as we get out of what, as of right now, is an impasse that has picket lines out across the country? Back to you both.
All right, it's 5:39, 9 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Well, Justin Trudeau loses a member of his cabinet as his now former employment works on clearing his name. Those details next. Welcome back. The National Parole Board is facing questions after telling the families of Paul Bernardo's victims they cannot attend his upcoming parole hearing.
And for more on this, let's go live to CP24's Lindsay Biscaya, who's also had a chance to speak to the attorney or the lawyer for the families. Lindsay.
Yeah, that's Tim Danson, Bakari and Lena. We spoke with him around 4:30, and he was saying, as he was on air with us, that he had just got a voicemail that he believed was from the parole board. So possibly we will be getting an update from him tonight in terms of what is going on, whether there is an update at all, because we know that Tim Danson had actually issued an open letter to the parole board once he learned that the families of the victims of the two teenagers of Paul Bernardo would not be allowed to be in person at Paul Bernardo's hearing next Tuesday in Montreal. And the parole board was citing safety and security concerns for all attendees. But Tim Danson was saying that he's a little bit confused. Is it security because of the danger posed by Paul Bernardo, or that there might be a danger posed by the families, which he says is not true? And so he's been asking for the hearing to be postponed until they can figure this out. He wants the families there to read their statements at this hearing. But again, we believe there might be an update coming tonight because, as I said, we spoke with Tim Danson earlier about what he hopes the parole board will do in this situation. And here's what he had to say.
And now they seem to be suggesting, contrary to the reasonings that they put before, where they were raising security and safety issues, which clearly now they seem to be admitting that that was kind of like a false pretense, and suggesting that maybe it's still up in the air that we could now attend, but only be in the hearing room at the time that the statements are read and not otherwise be in the room.
So again, Lena and Bakari, we're going to wait to see if we get an update. CP24 did also reach out to the parole board as well today to get some kind of clarification from that side of things in terms of why this decision has been made in the first place. Again, waiting back to hear from everyone at this point, but that hearing was set to take place next Tuesday in Montreal, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. Back to you.
All right, Lindsay Biscaya live in studio for us tonight. Lindsay, thanks so much for this, and we'll check back in for updates. Well, Randy Boissonnault is out of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's cabinet weeks after questions were raised about his past claims of Indigenous identity.
A statement from the Prime Minister's office says Boissonnault will step away from his role as employment minister, effective immediately, to focus on clearing the allegations made against him. Boissonnault recently walked back his past claims of Indigenous heritage and has been scrutinized for business ties involving an Edmonton-based medical supply company that bid for government contracts while identifying itself as Indigenous-owned.
Well, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre did not hold back during question period about the Boissonnault allegations. Take a listen.
And up until a minute ago, he had a minister with a double identity. The Prime Minister knew the minister was directing his business illegally from inside cabinet. He knew the minister had claimed there was another Randy when there was no other Randy. He knew that the minister had falsely claimed to be Indigenous in order to take money away from real Indigenous people, and yet he stood by him up until yesterday. Why is it that he always stands up for corruption on his own side?
The member for Edmonton Centre has stepped down from cabinet to focus on clearing these allegations. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition talks about the importance of speaking up. The reality is his MPs are no longer voices for their communities. They are his voice in their communities. That's not how this place is supposed to work.
And also, NDP MPP Blake Desjardins was also a vocal critic of Boissonnault before he stepped away.
When we abuse systems that were meant for Indigenous people to succeed and overcome barriers, and you abuse that system, it's wrong. And it needs to stop. I was very pleased today, and I'm certain Indigenous people right across this country welcome the news of the resignation of one of the most prolific pretendians in the House of Commons, and it's time that we address this issue moving forward.
And CTV News political commentator Scott Reed says Trudeau was left with little choice but to allow Boissonnault to step away.
The inevitable conclusion here is that the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office simply weren't prepared to carry water on this issue any longer. It has tied up the House for at least a couple of days. You saw the number and range of calls for his resignation increasing over the last couple of days. You saw not only the Conservatives, but then the NDP. And in fact, a Métis member of the New Democratic Party, which brings extra punch and emotion, obviously, and other Indigenous leaders. So I think ultimately they are not conceding that the allegations are valid, but they are saying that the minister will step aside.
And Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor will temporarily take over as employment minister.
Well, Canada has closed its embassy in Ukraine after the U.S. warned of a potential significant air attack.
The U.S., Italy, Greece, and Spain have also closed their embassies in Kyiv over fears about a possible assault. Air raid sirens sounded in the Ukrainian capital after Moscow launched a barrage of drone and missile strikes. It comes a day after Moscow said U.S.-made longer-range missiles have been used in a Ukrainian attack that struck a weapons warehouse in Russia's Bryansk region.
It is now 5:47, 9 degrees in the city. You're watching Live at 5.
And coming up, the proposed plan to make city vehicles safer. CP24's CJ Lou has this story. It's coming right up. City staff are recommending that side guards be added to all heavy-duty vehicles in Toronto's fleet as a way to protect pedestrians and cyclists.
We're live now to CP24's CJ Lou for all the details. So what would this look like, CJ?
Hi there. Well, essentially a side guard. It's a railing that can go underneath on the side of the larger trucks, which would hopefully prevent people from getting trapped underneath the vehicle in the case of a collision. And the city, they want to install these side guards on all city-owned heavy-duty trucks starting in December of 2025. Mayor Olivia Chow says this move could significantly reduce tragic collisions and save lives. According to the city staff, side guards guards can reduce cyclist fatalities by approximately 62% and pedestrian fatalities by about 20%. Now, a report is set to go before a city committee next week that will recommend all city-owned commercial vehicles be retrofitted with side guards. Now, the city has about 500 of these heavy-duty vehicles. The cost to retrofit them will be about $5.7 million. The plan is to have about 219 of them retrofitted by December of 2025, and the rest could be done in 2026. And Mayor Olivia Chow says she's been working on this plan for years. It started back in 2011 when she was an MP, and a woman in her area died after getting hit by a truck while riding a bike. And Mayor Olivia Chow says she made her family a promise that she would do something to make sure this never happens again. Take a listen to what city officials had to say about the effectiveness of these side guards.
If those trucks that are really busy in downtown Toronto, very large trucks, probably larger than this, were all outfitted with exactly the same safety measure, nobody would have to be so nervous when you're near these big trucks. So for all the people that have unfortunately not made it when they have interfaced with these trucks, whether they were at a school in Scarborough, whether they were at Sterling Road, in Parkdale, those are all tragedies that could have been avoided. And today we're basically saying we're stepping up. These tragedies will be avoided in the future.
Now, here in Canada, there are no federal or provincial regulations that ensure that vehicles have side guards. However, this is a common practice in Europe. And Mayor Olivia Chow says she will be meeting with the province's transport minister to discuss putting these side guards on vehicles provincially. Back to you.
All right, Sija, thanks so much for this. Time now is 5:53. It's 9 degrees.
And a new survey suggests that Canadians are preparing for an active holiday shopping season.
Yes, 67% of respondents in the FedEx Canada online holiday shopping survey say they'll spend the same or more than last year. Those planning to spend less cited inflation, increased cost of living, and fewer people to give gifts to as the main reasons for a reduction in holiday spending. Okay, now we can tell you the time and temp. It's 5:54, 9 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
And after the break, an update to a story about a Taylor Swift fan that had her art supplies confiscated at the airport. We're going to explain next. Okay, Selena, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this is not a good T Swift story.
Okay. Well, a Vancouver woman has arrived in Toronto to attend a Taylor Swift concert, but she lost more than $100 worth of beads along the way.
Yeah, Caitlin Medrak was planning to make friendship bracelets during the flight, and she had her supplies in her carry-on bag. We've seen lots of people walking around with friendship bracelets, right? It's a real thing. Well, she had no trouble boarding in Vancouver, but during a layover in Calgary, security staff told her she had exceeded the allowable bead limit. Didn't even know that was a thing. She was not allowed to take her crafting supplies on the second leg of her trip.
It's been, a crazy year, and the beads are such a huge part of, the whole Eras Tour experience, that being there and knowing that I had 4 hours on that plane to make the beads, having a busy life, it's sometimes hard to find the time to make enough bracelets for the thousands of Swifties we're going to meet. So I was really counting on that 4 hours to make my beads on the plane and make my bracelets. And unfortunately, as I arrived at Calgary security, they were like, heck no, girlfriend, you ain't taking those beads on the plane.
Okay, the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority says that it is investigating a complaint filed by that Swiftie. So remember how you were saying it's kind of a bad story. Yeah. Well, I was thinking not really, because of the environment that's created with all the Swifties when they're creating the beads. She's going to make friends. People are going to hear about this. She's going to get more beads than she can think of.
Yeah, you're so right about that. I mean, you and I were covering the Swift Mania last week, just outside Rogers Centre, and everybody was in such a great mood. They were walking around with these friendship bracelets. And the cool thing is, you exchange these bracelets. People have so many, so I'm sure she's going to get lots and lots. And speaking of Taylor Swift, we have an exciting announcement for our viewers. We're going to be back at Rogers Centre tomorrow.
Wait. You
Yeah, you're going to be in studio.
Yeah.
I'm going to be out there speaking with the Swifties, talking about Taylor Swift once again. She's going to be back in the city for her 4th show in Toronto. It's another sold-out show. It's an incredible environment, as you know, and it's just a nice news story to bring to our viewers. So we hope you tune in.
And the other thing about it is, even though the concert is going on inside, there's so much happening outside.
Oh, yeah, it is a real party. So we hope you'll join us. You're watching Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.